Welcome back, it's me, Lou, and I'm here again for another action review and unboxing. But if I have to be honest, I don't think I have the heart to open up this action figure and actually review it. Um, so back in the day, we're talking about the late 90s, early 2000s. I was in college, or was I still in college? I can't remember. Prior to the early 2000s. So in the late 90s, I was in college, and the WWF bone crunching action figures came out, and I'd collect them, and I loved it. I've always been a big fan of wrestling. I grew up on pro wrestling, especially the WWF/WWE. Before college, before my classes, I'd always go to Toys R Us because it was only like 2 blocks away from my school, and I'd always make a toy run before going to class. And I was always lucky because I was very fortunate because I always got first dibs on all the new action figures because I'd be at the store, immediately at 10 a.m. right when it opened because I had to make class. So I go to the store, and I was lucky because I'd always find all the new Star Wars figures, all the new wrestling figures, and I remember just being very fond of the WWF bone crunching figures that were produced by Jakks Pacific way back in the day. And one of my favorite figures was the Big Boss Man. It was great because I don't know, I just loved the sculpt. You know, he was kind of in this tactical riot gear. It kind of looked like the dude. I mean, back then, this is prior to I think that facial scan technology that like Gentle Giant Studios uses. So, these faces were kind of sculpted by artists, just eyeballing the photos they had of the wrestlers. But I remember when this figure came out, I thought it was the coolest thing because it looked like Boss Man. I love the new look of Big Boss Man. Like, prior to his WWF Attitude Run, most people might remember him from early 90s when he was still the Big Boss Man, but he kind of looked more like a state trooper or like a sheriff kind of deal. It was, he was wearing more blue, and I don't know, it was a completely different look. This was a very more modern, grittier take on the character, and I loved his new outfit. And as a child growing up watching wrestling, I was exposed to Big Boss Man early on when he worked the Mid-Atlantic area, like NWA, and he was Jim Cornette's bodyguard when Cornette was with the Midnight Express. And Big Boss Man back then was known as Big Bubba Rogers. So, I don't know, I always just loved this wrestler. I thought he was really cool. His finishing move was the Sidewalk Slam. And I remember I used to play wrestle with my younger brother. And then it's like one of those things where, as little kids, you don't always know that wrestling's fake. So you're kind of like really beating the crap out of each other. And then I gave him the Sidewalk Slam, and it like knocked the wind out of him. So I just remember being able to use that finishing hold because I learned it from watching Big Boss Man on TV. So anyhow, I don't know, I just got really nostalgic for this figure. I used to have a giant collection of these bone crunching action figures in college, and there was a certain point where I thought I was going to grow out of toys. I think it had to be honest, it's probably girls. I remember I brought a girl home once, and then she saw my collection of wrestling figures, and then I don't know if I was embarrassed or proud at the same time because she was kind of surprised that I had so many, but I didn't know if that was a compliment. But then I remember, I think it might have been after I graduated college, Jakks started releasing better versions of the wrestlers. I think they moved up to past the bone crunching stuff to the Titantron figures, and those figures were they were taller, they were sculpted better. The likeness still wasn't there, but I thought they were cooler. And for some reason or the other, I don't know what I was thinking. I'm like, hey, I'm upgrading to these new toys. I should just throw out my old ones. And I threw out the box of my bone crunching action figures, and just hearing me say that now just makes me really sad. I don't know what the hell I was thinking. And then over the last few years, I try to recollect some of the ones I was fond of. Because honestly, sometimes I just buy them back in the day just because they were new figs. It doesn't necessarily mean I was a fan of the wrestler or of the toy itself. But the past few years, if I came across a decent figure, from it wasn't my childhood, I was in college, but if I came across a figure from my past that I was fond of, I'd, buy it. And this popped up on eBay. it was actually a reasonable price. I think I might have paid like $10 for it. And this came out much later than the original release, because this was part of the Backlash line. And it was interesting because Jakks, they moved on from using this style of action figure because the toy engineering got a little bit better, and they were releasing a little bit more larger detailed figures that were called Titantron figures. So this was an interesting line because this figure was re-released, I think maybe like 4 or 5 years later, and they already had the newer style figures out in circulation for some time, and you can see them here. So my dilemma is kind of like, do I want to open this just for the feels? But at the same time, when I look at this package, even though it's a couple years later from when I actually collected these toys, it kind of this package by itself kind of encapsulates the entire era of when I was into these wrestling action figures. Because for one, here's Big Boss Man, big fan of him, love this style of action figure. But then when I look at the back of the box, it just really takes me back to this era when they're transitioning from the older toys into the newer toys. And then when I look at the wrestlers here, it kind of reminds me of that era of WWF, of the Attitude Era. This, I think, was prior to before they went into Ruthless Aggression. And I don't know, it's very difficult for me to decide right now. It's like, do I keep this on the card for nostalgia reasons, or do I open it up just so I could fiddle around with it for a couple of minutes? I'm not too sure. I mean, I'll decide. For now, let's just look at the figure through the window and the package. Alright, so this is a WWF Backlash Superstars, produced by Jakks Pacific for ages 8 and up. As you can tell, this was eventually sold at a dollar store. This was sold at Family Dollar for $5. And I want to say, I think the retail of these figures might have been under 10. So these might have been like maybe anywhere between $7 to like $9 figures. But at Family Dollar, it's more of a bargain, and it's kind of cool that whoever bought this bought it for $5. In terms of the figure itself, so I'm not sure if I'll open it yet, but for now, let's just kind of review it while it's in the window. I love the figure. The likeness of Ray Traylor, it's alright. My first thought looking at this now, it's like, it almost kind of looks like modern day Undertaker now that he's retired, or even like if you colored the hair white, you can even pass off the head as Kevin Nash. And it's kind of cool that Boss Man had this like had the tactical gear gimmick way long before some of these other wrestlers wore the tactical gear. Like the Shield, Rollins, Roman Reigns, and Dean Ambrose, aka Jon Moxley. When they burst onto the scene in NXT and WWE, I think it was more for WWE. Their trademark uniforms was the tactical gear outfits, and it's just crazy that Boss Man kind of predated that look. Maybe like 12 or 15 years prior to that. It's a look that other wrestlers would don over time. Like I remember, I think it was Johnny the Bull Stamboli. When he went to WWF, he wore tactical armor for a little bit. And that guy was a beast. That was a guy that like press slammed Rikishi, and for some reason no one ever talks about that. But that was an impressive feat. But Big Boss Man, he was a character I liked a lot. I grew up watching WWF. I think that was kind of my first formal introduction to pro wrestling. And then after I got into WWF, I'd discover all the other kind of promotions just through channel surfing. I became a big fan of World Class Wrestling. That was based out of Texas. Growing up, I remember that was on channel 60, I think, in the Chicagoland area. I also discovered NWA, Mid-Atlantic Wrestling. I want to say that might have been on channel 60 also. And this is where I was introduced to the Big Boss Man. But back then, he was known as Big Bubba Rogers, and he was the bodyguard of Jim Cornette. And he was the manager of the Midnight Express. And Cornette's still around. I mean, he does like podcasts and stuff. But growing up, Cornette, he was like a heel manager. And he carried around a tennis racket. And he'd always get involved in his wrestlers' matches. And they would cheat because he'd like throw in his tennis racket. And they'd use it on like the Rock and Roll Express and like knock them out. And then He pinned them, and they held on to the NWA World Tag Belts for a little bit. One of the memorable feuds is they feuded with the Road Warriors in a scaffold match. And a funny story about Big Boss Man, when he was Big Bubba Rogers. So the scaffold match is essentially kind of like a platform. It's elevated by this giant steel support structure, and the platform, it's almost similar to like what a construction worker or a painter uses when they have to paint like multi-storied like buildings or houses. So they had this platform that ran like 20 feet above the ring. And at the end of the match, the Road Warriors already won, and they chased Jim Cornette to the top of the scaffold. And Big Boss Man, back then known as Big Bubba Rogers, he was in the middle of the ring, and he was supposed to catch Jim Cornette when he fell from the top. But I think he missed or effed up, and Cornette fell straight flat, and he broke his like knees or something. And then later down the road, Big Boss Man, he eventually moved to WWF, and that's where most people know him now as Big Boss Man. And he was really cool back then. But when he was in the WWF during the Attitude Era, he was awesome. He was a cool bad guy. He made Al Snow eat his dog. He took Big Show's deceased father in the coffin and dragged the coffin around the cemetery in a car. It was wild, I think, if my memory serves me correctly. So anyhow, yeah, I'm stoked to have this figure, but it's like, I don't know if I want to open it. I like the package design a lot. I love the use of warm colors. I love the orange and the yellows and the reds. It's such a throwback to the 90s in terms of package design. The card's kind of warping, but the figure looks great. It kind of has that egg-shaped plastic bubble, and his baton's like showcased on the side, and he's just kind of there, and there's a nice character card of him. It's really cool. And then on the back, I really miss this about toys. I don't think companies put as much stock into like toy photography on the packaging as much as they used to. Like, I loved it back in the day when I was a little kid and I'd buy Star Wars figures, and then on the back of the box, or in the back of the card, there'd be a photograph, and you'd have all the different Star Wars figures that you could collect, and it was so cool. Nowadays, you buy like a figure, and you might just get like a one sentence bio of the character, and maybe like a drawing of them or a photograph, and that's it. It doesn't inform the kid or the collector of what else is out there in the line. Like, for me, like, even if I don't have these accessories, just being able to see photos of them is kind of cool. And I think that's the dilemma I have, trying to figure out whether or not I want to open up this package. Because the minute I open this up, this cardboard gets thrown into the recycle bin, and it's lost to history. And for me, I'm kind of like a mint on card, mint in box collector. I don't always open all my toys, and if I do, sometimes I kind of preserve the box if I could. Because I like stuff in the package, it kind of reminds me of when you first see the toy on the shelves or hanging on the pegs. I think that's a big thing with me, collecting the action figures. It's not just about the action figure. For me, it's about the experience of it. Like, I love the memories it brings back of me hunting for toys with all my buddies during college or after college, before everyone got married and couldn't collect anymore. I remember I'd meet up with my brother and his friends during their lunch break. We'd go out for lunch, and then afterwards we'd go to the Toys R Us and we'd look for toys. Or with my buddy JC, we'd do Walmart runs looking for toys like at 2 o'clock in the morning, and that was such a fun time. So for part of me, it's not always about the action figure itself, but I guess also what the action figure represents. So I think that's going to be the thing for me. Like, for this toy, I think I've made up my mind. As much as I want to open them up, I think I might just keep it on the card for now. If I can find another one loose, cool, but I think for now I'm just going to keep this one on the card. The thing's 21 years old. Every time you open up a toy, that means there's one less out there in the wild, So yeah, I think I'm just going to keep this on card for now. But if, I'll look around. If I could find another one with a slightly better package, I might get that and open up this one. Or if I could find a really nice loose one, I will. But yeah, I wasn't expecting to, not fall in love with the toy. But, when I first bought this on eBay. My intent was just to open it and put it with the rest of my bone crunching collection that I'm slowly reamassing. I didn't expect that. Like, as soon as I took out the shipping container, I'm looking at it, I'm like, I can't bring myself to open this. All right. Yeah, so I think this is more so, this isn't really a video review. I think this is more me just talking about, you know, my collection habits, a little bit of my history with this line. And it's about, for me, it's just, you know, just holding this right now, it's just about the feels and what the toy means to me. All right, so yeah, I kind of apologize that this was not an actual review, but I hope you pulled something away from it. You know, maybe some of you are like me and you can relate to this. I think nowadays there's a weird mentality, especially with social media. It's kind of like keeping up with the Joneses. I see a lot of it. It's so easy to adopt the attitudes of other collectors or what, you know, people are telling you, you know, they think is cool and all that. But sometimes you just have to collect stuff because you like it, not because it's trendy or it's the hot new thing. You know, there's nothing wrong with a figure just because it has 5 points of articulation or it doesn't look realistic or it's just goofy. You know what I mean? Sometimes this is more just about your personal experience or history with the figure. And I think that's where it becomes, you know, either priceless or invaluable to you. Well, anyhow, my name is Lou. I hope you pulled something away from this video, and I appreciate your time that you spend with me to check these things out. So I wish you a very excellent day, and drop by anytime.